Welcome. All right, I'm going to do a very brief introduction as we let folks continue to join us. But hello and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We're excited to welcome you to another session in our monthly webinar series. Today's session will focus on leading excellence through organizational culture. I'm Nellie Stansbury, Denison Consulting's Director of Digital Marketing. And before I introduce today's speakers, I'd like to encourage you all to use the chat and Q&A features below. Please test their functionality by sharing where you're joining from. I'm joining from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Our team is pretty dispersed as well, so if they want to chime in. Our team will be watching your comments and questions, and we'll pose them to our speakers at the end of their discussion during Q&A. And I'd like to quickly introduce today's speakers before turning things over to them. I'm joined by several members of the Denison team. Our speakers today are Jay Richards, Senior Consultant and Partner, and Raul Gomez, Leadership and Culture Advisor. We're also joined by Margaret Gorman, VP of Sales and Marketing, who will be helping me answer questions throughout the session. With that, I'll turn things over to Raul to get us started, but so glad you're here to join us.
Hello, thank you, Nellie. Greatly appreciate the introduction. And yeah, hopefully everyone's out of the hurricane's way. Thoughts and prayers are with you. You know, I'm in San Diego, California. I never thought I would hear hurricane and San Diego together in the same sentence, but that was happening about a week and a half ago. So I got that whole new experience. So again, just thoughts and prayers, and hopefully you are not impacted by that. But also because of being in San Diego, you know, my family and I went over to the San Diego Zoo over the weekend, and my wife always tells me, she's such a kidder. She says, you know, Raul, you really shouldn't go to the zoo that often. I say, why not? And she says, you know, they might not let you out. So I say, you know, and why is that? Because they might confuse you for one of the animals, is what she says. So I said, oh my goodness. So anyway, that's my loving wife of 23 years. So it's all fun and games over here. But I want to take an opportunity. You know, number one, thank you for joining us. Thank you for spending the time joining my colleague Jay Richards and I. We're going to talk about, you know, actions and what, you know, some of the client experiences are that we've been working with. But also wanted to take an opportunity to kind of focus on something that maybe isn't paid attention to as much, and that's kind of the organizational readiness of considering a culture project or you know, taking on a culture shift as needed. And you know, if you see this stat here of 70% of culture shifts fail, this was provided by McKinsey. And by the way, CHRM, the Society for Human Resources Management, provided another stat that says 68% of culture shift and culture projects tend to fail. And that'll be, you know, for this list of items that we have here, these are the ones that we hear most often from our clients, if we want to pull that list up. The big, you know, one of the big ones being a lack of a clear why, right? You know, if I think of a German philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche, he says, you know, as long as we have a clear why, we can bear anyhow. And so, you know, there's a lot of inadequate communication as it rolls down from leadership and throughout an organization. Another one is lack of employee involvement in the process. Diversity within the internal culture teams. Number one, is there even a culture team internally that can run and help with this type of shift that's needed from the ground floor? And then what does that diversity look like within that culture team? Are the different areas of the organization being represented that can inform, you know, what a potential shift needs to look like, or what are some of those blind spots that we need to be taking into consideration? Unrealistic expectations and timeframes, right? What can we really do, and how do we know that we can actually do them, right? This is part of that discovery phase. We have to, you know how adaptable is the organization? Can we really change on a dime, or do we have to slow the process down? Lack of qualitative data to combine with quantitative in the discovery and diagnostic phase. So, you know, Denison, our flagship and we're known around the world for our diagnostic tool, the Denison Organizational Culture Survey. But we also like to go into organizations and gather some of the qualitative data via, focus groups, interview process, that type of thing, to get, some more data, some more information that's going to guide us moving forward. With that, I'd like, before we go into these next key clues here, I'd like to ask the audience, what are some other reasons that you see out there? If you could just type that in to the chat, what are some other reasons that you see in regards to, why do our culture shifts tend to fail? What else would you add to that? What are we seeing there, Nellie?
Poor communication, no burning platform, conceptual resistance, thinking you can make people change, not inspire and lead, adopting feedback from employees, ownership of leadership, failure to listen to colleagues, organizational success, underestimating the time needed, mediocre talent, no commitment from the associate culture, and lack of active sponsorship by leaders.
Absolutely. No, those are all great. Thank you for sharing those. These next two that we'll see here, the first one is a lack of leadership commitment. These are the big ones that we see from organizations. And they'll, Jay and I are on these conversations with organizations all the time where we'll hear, we have these trigger words, and the way the conversation will start is, we've been tasked with, and that's the first aha where we say, okay, who's delegating this on down and why, right? It doesn't mean it's going to stop anything. It just tells us and informs us that, we got to make sure that, the right people are involved. And lack of leadership commitment is definitely one of them. And somebody mentioned sponsorship. And it goes beyond that, interestingly enough, right? Because who tends to influence culture within organizations most? It'll tend to be leadership. And so leadership has to lead by example. Leadership has to demonstrate those desired behaviors that they're looking for, because they have new results to achieve, right? There's something new that we need to achieve every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, and so forth. And so most of the time, that's going to require new experiences, new behaviors, and new habits. But who has to lead the way? It will tend to have to be leadership and leading by example, because if it's not, then you will hear a lot of folks thinking or even behaving in a way that'll say, well, we can do the same old, but guess what? An organization will tend to underperform if that's the case. So lack of leadership commitment. Then the question is, why is there a lack of leadership commitment? And the list on that could be pretty extensive. A lot of folks don't know what to do with the information or what to do with culture. The big one, and probably the biggest one, lack of action, right? Lack of meaningful action, I should say, right? We're okay. I won't say that we're good at gathering the data to inform us to move forward, but lack of meaningful action is one here. We gather the data, we have it, and we don't know what to do with it, or at least we don't take that meaningful action. We see this all the time. It's a checking off the box type of event. We got the data, we got the information, but we don't have a plan moving forward. And so this is what we're helping organizations with here. A quote from Pablo Picasso says, "Action is the foundational key to all success." Right, and our take on it is, meaningful action leads to meaningful impact. Here's a long list of other reasons why culture projects will tend to fail. We'll shoot this out to you so you have that. We won't go through all of these, but you'll have that when we send you over the link. So we've seen this many times over and over, some version of this. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, right? And a lot of times it's almost like it's as if this is automatic, this is by default. And it doesn't have to be this way, right? Just because culture can eat strategy for breakfast, it doesn't mean it should. We got to have a balance of strategy. We've all seen organizations that have a strong culture, but has a weak strategy, right? And we've seen the opposite as well. We've seen an organization with a strong strategy, but a weak culture. In either case, either scenario, the organization will tend to underperform in the outcomes and the results that it's looking to achieve. So we got to be able to seek that balance of culture and that strategy. And if we have that right balance, right, and as there's an ebb and flow, it's not stagnant, we're going to get to those desired results that are required for organizations moving forward. When organizations do this right, and they spend the time, because it is a process, like many of you have mentioned here, in regards to taking a look at the real time frame that it takes. Now we can start taking a look at not only actions, but meaningful action that are tied to performance. And when they do this right, this is what Jay is going to share with you in the next few slides here, with a couple of client experiences of what meaningful action looks like when the organization is ready, when people are committed, and we're getting everybody involved to move forward. So Jay, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Raul. And it's good to know that there are people out there that actually get out of the zoo. In my case, I always end up in a holding cell for somebody.
I made it.
Till somebody comes and gets me. But yeah, you're right on. Action. I've been doing this for 25 years. And to me, it's a lot of times people get to the survey phase and think, hey, we took a culture survey. Why didn't we get better? And it's a thermometer. At the end of the day, it's a thermometer, and it's a picture of our culture at a certain point in time. It's up to us to kind of tell the story, right? And so what I like to do is go in and mine that data. And if I can tell that story, I can get people's attention, right? So here's an example. This is just a global manufacturing company that I'd worked with. 69 facilities all over the world, right? They've done it time one, time two, okay? And so by going in and looking at the data, not just the picture of what they look like now, but going in and looking at what's driving some of these various profiles. Here, I basically divided all of the facilities into those that were in the bottom quartile, 14 sites, second, third, and the top quartile, 10 sites. And then what I looked at was we did an action index with this question. There was a specific question that says, was action actually taken? Did you see it? Okay. And what you see is in the bottom quartile, 2.98. On an average, 2.98 of the people realized maybe there was some action taken. Okay. That's average, right? And as you go up the quartiles, you see actually that more and more people were seeing action being taken. And what you see is the various profiles, right? Bottom quartile, that's our classic donut of doom, second, third, and then fourth, right? The cool thing that we noticed was those that were actually taking action, or more action than the others, the bottom two quartiles, were actually improving, okay, on this culture improvement piece. Even more interesting is those that didn't take action, or people saw less action being taken, actually got worse. Why is that, right? I mean, I'm a survey guy, right? I've been doing this, like I said, for 25 years. I've heard with these donut of dooms and with these below average cultures, so often people say, why am I having to take the survey again? We didn't do anything with it last time, right? That's a huge indicator. You'll also see it with their response rates, right? They'll actually start going down. People are, well, fewer people are taking the survey now. Well, what did you do with it? That would be my question, right? But what we do here, and somebody mentioned that in those comments, creating that burning platform or the sense of urgency. And that's what I do with this data, right? So I go to the client, I show them this data, and it hopefully helps create that sense of urgency that it's more than a thermometer that we have to take action. Because guess what? Those top quartiles, the third and the fourth quartile, if you go and ask everybody to say, we've done a culture survey, let's take action, let's do something with it. Guess who we often hear from the most? We're always going to hear from the third and the top quartile. They love this stuff. They're almost like naturals at it. So we have to go often to the ones that are below average, the bottom quartile, the second quartile. They're the ones that are usually just hiding from the data, right? So these are the types of things that we like to do to look at data and help leaders make better decisions on this, okay? And here, proof in the pudding, right, is that if you take action, you will see culture improvement. And this is just the data. I've been doing it, like I said, 25 years. I see it over and over and over again. Those that actually do stuff with it, put things together, often have the best luck at actually improving their culture, okay? So what do we do? So when we go in, I like to look at it as a holistic approach, right? For coaching leaders, but also we've got the ability to go in and talk to employees too. So I like to look at it doing the upper level, the leadership, top level people, one-on-one interviews, talking to them about their business. But then I like to go also to this coaching the managers and supervisors, getting down to that lower level of people. These are the people we often forget to develop, right? They go from individual contributor up to a supervisor level and are often left out there just to kind of fend for themselves, right? So what we do is we develop these coaching sessions and give them coaching sessions at that level to help them become better leaders, right? But it's also not always just about that. A lot of times we'll take it down, like I said, this holistic approach. Employees can have an impact on that culture as well. Now, to me, leaders drive it, but employees can create it as well. And we'll show you how that's done, okay? So here's another example, okay? And we talked about culture eat strategy for lunch. Okay, here's an organization. Once again, it's another manufacturing firm, but they're struggling with safety. They've got a safety program that beats any OSHA program out there. They're above average in how they address safety. So policies and procedures and training, boom, they got it. The issue lies in behaviors, okay? It lies in the culture of the organization. So if we're looking at this profile right here, the overall profile, I go in, I look at it, and I'm like sitting back thinking, you got a pretty good organization here, okay? You're above average. And you've got, 5 of these quartiles are, in the 4th quartile. So if we're just looking at that data alone, we might miss some things, okay? So once again, what do? You go in and you mine the data. You look for the story. And what we've got here is this top profile, the above average managers profile. So these are the people that are in units where the managers are managing an above average profile. So once again, they are almost top quartile. But then when you go down into some of these units that are struggling, you got a third of that organization is being managed by a below average manager, a below average profile, okay? So to me, it's like when you've got an organization, you want just one culture. You don't want subcultures where 2/3 of the organization is feeling really good about this culture, seeing it in an effective way and things like that. Whereas a third of them aren't feeling that same feeling, right? That same culture. They're not living that same culture that the others are. So based on that, we go in and we do our coaching, right? We go in to the supervisor level because they're the ones that are going to have the impact on the greatest number of employees. And we start coaching them up. And what you find at that supervisor level is, like I said earlier, they're often left alone. So they kind of go sit back and learn, or have learned from others that they've seen, which could be command and control. It could be, things of that nature. And we start teaching them new ways to be effective in terms of how we communicate, how we work across functional boundaries, and the importance of working across functional boundaries. So we're all working toward the same goal. The importance of developing our team and what that means to us and holding people accountable, delegating, creating change, all of these things. And you start turning them on. And a lot of times, man, they are just absolutely loving this. And they love it because they don't get that kind of experience oftentimes. It's not until we move farther up in the organization that we get to go to these great executive education type things. So what we do is we go in, we coach them up, we give them over a 3-month period. We give them a 360, show them on that first session what it's all about, what it means. Second session, we're setting goals. Third session, we're doing course corrections, what worked, what didn't work. And then we set the yearly goal of where you'll go toward the future and things like that. And the cool thing was with this particular one, but it's the same with pretty much everything that we've seen. Here's another one. So here's our below average time 1. This is what they looked like 18 months later. We took them from a below average profile by teaching them new ways to lead people. And they've had almost a quarter percentile point bump in just that short period of time. Now we've got people living in the culture that everybody else is experiencing. So we're bringing everybody up. Incidentally, I didn't show that because I'm not a big believer in too many slides, but the above average group, the one there up above, they actually also improved, just not to the extent, obviously, because they had less room for improvement. But that's how we're coaching the leaders. So we've done the above group, the senior leaders with interviews. We've done probably 360s with them, but also attacking that whole supervisor manager level, right? But sometimes that's not enough, okay? And what happens is, as you go through this whole process, whether it's a culture survey or talking with supervisors, leaders, and senior leaders, you're starting to learn the organization a lot more. And so you might run into things where you realize we need to start pulling these people in and start talking to the employees and get them to understand that, hey, you can have an impact as well. And so an example would be, we're with a site on the East Coast. And one of the things we learned through that experience, as we went from all of these different managers and leaders, and also just talking to employees, was they literally had a culture of griping, a culture of griping. And one guy put it perfectly, and I still repeat this over and over again. And he's like, Jay, if I took a gold brick and sat it in front of everybody in the room, they'd complain about having to carry it to the parking lot. And that was very true, right? And so what happens is, as the senior people within the environment complain, they're not really necessarily going to go anywhere, right? When you got senior people in an organization, 10, 15, 20 years, they're not going to give up all of their perks and things like that, right? But what happens is, as these newer employees come in and start hearing this atmosphere, the 1 to 5 years, those are the ones that are most likely to leave, and they will. That's where your turnover usually exists. So you start getting them to understand how you do this. And what you do is you pull them into this workshop, okay? So we do this thing, and we actually call it the Positive Mindset Workshop. 2 days, get them off site, get them in a room, and start having some really good conversations. Now, keep in mind, we make these things fun. I don't really believe in these little feel-good events, right? I want to make it fun, but also hard-hitting. So we get into some really tough topics. We include not only employees, but we'll usually include the managers at that level too, because we want them to hear and we want them to learn. And so as we do this, we do it to improve culture. We also do it to tailor the workshop to fit the department. So when we're going in, before we do any of these workshops, we're talking to the supervisors and managers, talking about what are the issues that are unique to them. So this is kind of an off the shelf, but we tailor it to make it more personal to the group. And so through this, we do understanding of human behavior, the human operating system, get them to understand why we are who we are. We also get employees to understand, when you're dealing with this person, they're not always going to see things your way, right? This is where they may be coming from. So we're doing into like personality types. We do effective listening, empathy, accountability, working across departments, breaking down silos, all of that stuff. And I tell you, it's a blast watching people, because we come in, we do, usually when we're doing these are really, really tough groups. And so you never know how it's going to turn out. But usually at the end of that 2 days, you can just see the energy in the room go from dark to light, and to the point where, they're really actually, thanking us for actually taking the time to do that. We also always follow up afterward, right? And with the managers and leaders, and we do the one, I think it's the Sun Delaney thing, the mood elevator. We talk about that. And, one of the groups that we did, we asked them, hey, how's everything going this week? He goes, good Lord, Jay, everybody's talking about the mood elevator. We're about the mood elevator and things like that. And that's cool, because that tells us that it worked. And so that, that's a great way for us basically to help take it from the top to the middle to the bottom and get everybody focused on, this is what I can do to improve culture. Okay.
Yeah, you talk about Jay being in a dark space for a lot of those participants in the positive mindset workshop. It is the difference between that growth mindset and fixed mindset, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to get people to think, oh, there is a better way. There's actually more that I could be doing, or at least a shift in what I could be doing, and it could definitely be more productive versus hands crossed and same old. I'm not going to change my ways type thing. So that's
Oh,
awesome.
you bet. I tell you, Raul, the eye opener for this one facility, right, was, here they were dealing with like an enormous amount of open positions. Well, how are open positions created? They're created by people leaving or growth, but more than likely leaving. And what does that do? You got people that are senior to the organization that are griping about it. It's always what they're doing, up above, this and that. And they don't necessarily realize that, hey, by doing that, when you got new people coming into the organization, you're telling them they're getting screwed from the get-go.
Yeah.
Why would you stick around, right? So what you do is you gotta get them. Once again, you're telling a story on the data. You get them to understand how they can have an impact as well. And what the cool thing is about it is that at the end of the week or at the end of the 2 days, we're doing I wills, and they're journaling the whole time. We give them little Denison journals and they're writing it on what they commit to and things like that. And they get it. They get it after that. When they see the impact that they can have, it's huge. It's really huge.
Yeah, as you know, Jay, a lot of people from all around the world come to us for our diagnostic tools, right? But there's a lot of considerations that need to happen pre and post, and so we're always happy to help organizations with that as well, because there are things to think about as you take on this journey. So that's awesome.
You bet. Exactly. Sometimes I just feel we could be even more arrogant as an organization ourselves, right?
Yeah.
When people come to us and say, we want to take a culture survey. It's like, well, do you want to change culture? And how
you're not ready.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And I've worked with the organizations where it just wasn't happening. And sometimes you got to cut them loose, right?
Yeah, and the opposite is true, not as often, but the opposite is true as well, that some organizations are way ahead of the game too, right? Those are rare and we love those, but like you said, the majority are.
You bet. Yeah. I've got plenty of my clients that come in, they've got it. They might be full of IO psychologists, or they've been doing it for a long time. You'll know that. Yeah. You know that, I know that, we know who can. But it's the others that might be, they usually are typically new to us, and you can hear through the dialogue how serious they may be, So I mean, you just got to get at that. So
excellent. Well, questions and discussion, Nellie, what do you have for us here?
Yeah, we only have a few moments. Jay, if you wanted to move on to the next slide, and I'll ask a few questions. I know Margaret provided Raul and Jay's contact information in the chat for everyone. But I'll field a few questions, and then any questions we don't get to, our team will do our best to follow up with you after.
Yeah. And as you gather those questions, Nellie, please take advantage of this offer. We'll have Jay and I will be happy to connect with you for a 30-minute advisory session. Any and all topics around culture that you want to discuss, we'll be happy to help you with that and see if there's an opportunity to work together. So we look forward to those opportunities.
Thanks, Raul. All right, let's take time for one or two questions. A participant wrote in, it's my understanding that it's easier to convince below average managers to engage in cultural improvements when asking them to improve aspects of their circumplex that are already excelling. When further improving one aspect of their circumplex, I imagine the rest of the circumplex will improve as well. Is that something that the two of you have seen over time?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're not like, a lot of times I'll tell people, if you're working on mission, you're going to probably increase other areas as well. It's not like one or the other, it's both. And so if I'm like, to me, like when I'm looking at a leader perspective, the 360, the red part is to me communicating purpose, direction, strategy, things like that. And I think if you do that better, I think you're going to also probably be thinking about how I work across functional boundaries, how I create change in the organization. So yeah, my answer to that is yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, let's chat with one more. it seems that it's not just about taking action, but having your workforce know that you're taking action. If the workforce perceives a lack of action, your efforts might be less effective.
Yeah, that's why this work is hard, right? It's not just action, it's meaningful action. And then what do we mean by meaningful action? Meaningful action is that we're taking the time to make the connections of one's actions to the purpose, to the overall performance of the organization, and making those connections so that folks don't just feel like they're doing, the set of tasks every day, because that's when burnout and people feeling stressed out and overwhelmed comes into play. We have to make those connections for people, and that's a leader's job, right? And that's why this is it's complex work.
Yeah, and I agree. We need to let them know. We need to let them know. I remember we were just starting to talk to a state government, and they were telling us about their climate survey they had done in the past. And they were very proud of that survey. They said, this 5 years ago, we did this, that, and did the survey, increased participation, great. And then this last survey, it cut in half. It's fewer people were taking it. And they were like, why? And I'm like, well, what did you do? That's always going to be my first question. And they did. They told me all the great things that they had done. And then my next question was, did you tell everyone you did it? And they were like, oops. You know what I mean? And it's like, you got to hit it all, right? You got to take the action, but let them know. Let them know.
Well, hopefully everybody can tell in the audience that we can talk about this for days. This is what we do. We love it. So thank you for your time today. Greatly appreciate you taking the time out to join us.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Jay, Raul, for your time. As we've said, we'll do our best to follow up with any questions, but also feel free to reach out to today's speakers to book a free advisory session. We'll be sending out the presentation and recording to everyone in the following days as well. But thank you all for your time. Thanks again, Raul and Jay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.